The mountain air carried the scent of pine and something else, something alien. Dr. Sarah Chen paused at the edge of the forest clearing, her veterinary med-kit heavy in her grip. The crater before her stretched nearly 30 feet wide, steam still rising from its edges despite the cool autumn morning. But it wasn't the impact site that made her breath catch. It was what lay at its center. The creature looked like someone had merged a wolf with an armored vehicle, its massive form easily twice the size of a horse. Iridescent scales covered its body, some cracked to reveal pulsing circuitry beneath. Each labored breath released small clouds of bioluminescent particles into the dawn air. "Mom, what is it?" 12-year-old Maya whispered from behind her, clutching their first aid supplies. "Stay back," Sarah warned, though she knew her daughter's curiosity would win out. They'd seen the news feeds about the Drachnid invasion force that Earth's defense fleet had repelled last week. This had to be one of their notorious war dogs, living weapons bred and augmented for combat. The creature's eye opened, revealing a complex mechanical iris that focused on them with frightening precision. Sarah instinctively pushed Maya behind her, but instead of aggression, she saw something else in that gaze. Pain, fear, confusion. A weak growl emerged from the beast's throat, more pleading than threatening. Sarah had spent 20 years treating injured animals, and in that moment, she didn't see a weapon of war. She saw a patient in desperate need. "Maya, get the portable scanner from the truck," she said, slowly approaching the fallen giant. "And call Uncle James. Tell him we're going to need his barb." The war dog watched her approach, its massive head tracking her movement. Up close, the damage was even worse. Plasma burns had melted through sections of its armor, and what looked like anti-personnel rounds had shredded one of its flanks. Most concerning were the flickering lights beneath its scales, some kind of power system failing. "I'm going to help you," Sarah said softly, knowing the creature might not understand her words, but hoping it would sense her intent. "But you have to let me." The war dog's iris contracted, then expanded. A series of clicks and whirs emerged from its throat, almost like it was trying to speak. Then, slowly, it lowered its head to the ground. A gesture of submission that must have gone against every fiber of its engineered nature. Maya returned with the scanner and gasped at the sight of the creature up close. "It's beautiful," she whispered, and despite everything, Sarah had to agree. Even wounded, there was an undeniable majesty to the being before them. The scanner's readings confirmed Sarah's fears. Multiple system failures, severe tissue damage, and some kind of biological power source that was rapidly degrading. Without intervention, the creature would die within hours. "Maya, prep the trailer with a heavy-duty lift. We need to get him to James's barn before anyone else spots him." Sarah began unpacking emergency stabilizers, her mind already racing through improvised treatments. Most of her medical knowledge was based on Earth creatures, but the fundamentals of trauma care had to apply, even to alien biology. As they worked to stabilize the war dog, Sarah noticed something else in its eyes: recognition. Not of them specifically, but of what they were doing. This wasn't just a biological weapon. It was an intelligent being, watching and understanding as they fought to save its life. They managed to get the creature loaded just as the first rays of sun crested the mountains. As their truck carefully navigated the back roads to her brother's remote farm, Sarah caught Maya watching their passenger through the trailer's camera feed. "We're committing treason, you know," Sarah said quietly, "harboring an enemy combatant." Maya's expression was fierce with conviction. "No, Mom. We're doing what you've always taught me, helping someone who needs it. Even if they're different, even if we're scared." The war dog's eye flickered toward the camera, and Sarah could have sworn she saw something change in its mechanical gaze, like a first spark of hope in a long darkness. James was waiting when they arrived, his face grave, but his barn doors open. As they worked to transfer their patient into the makeshift medical bay they'd created, Sarah knew they were embarking on something unprecedented. They weren't just saving a life. They were perhaps building the first bridge between two species that had only known war. The war dog, whom Maya had already started calling Atlas, watched them with growing awareness as they hooked up modified medical equipment. Sarah realized they weren't just fighting against physical trauma. They were battling against everything this creature had been programmed to be. And somehow, she knew this was just the beginning of a much longer story. As she prepared the first round of treatment, Sarah whispered to their unusual patient, "Welcome to Earth, Atlas. Let's show you what humanity is really about." The first week was a delicate dance of trust and technology. Sarah spent countless hours in James's converted barn, piecing together Atlas's complex biological systems with whatever Earth medicine and modified equipment they could manage. The war dog's artificial components proved both a blessing and a curse. They helped regulate his vital functions, but required constant monitoring to prevent cascade failures. Maya became Atlas's constant companion, reading to him from her science textbooks during his conscious periods. Whether he understood the words didn't matter. Her presence seemed to calm him, and his bioluminescent patterns would shift to softer blues whenever she was near. It was during one of these reading sessions that they discovered Atlas could communicate. Maya had been explaining Earth's solar system when the war dog's scales rippled with purpose, projecting a holographic star map onto the barn wall. Sarah nearly dropped her medical scanner in surprise. "He's not just receiving information," she breathed, watching the detailed projection. "He's teaching us back." Atlas's mechanical iris focused on them, and a series of complex patterns danced across his scales. Through trial and error, they began to develop a crude form of communication, different colors and patterns for yes, no, danger, and other basic concepts. The more they learned, the more Sarah realized that Atlas's intelligence far exceeded what his creators had intended. But their fragile peace was threatened one morning when government vehicles appeared on the county road. James spotted them during his morning patrol and immediately called Sarah. "Military plates," he reported tensely. "They're checking farms in the area. Someone must have picked up Atlas's energy signature." Sarah's heart raced as she looked at their patient. Atlas had improved dramatically. His wounds were healing, and his power systems had stabilized thanks to their jerry-rigged solutions. But he was far from fully recovered, and moving him would risk undoing all their progress. Atlas's scales flickered with warning patterns. He'd sensed their anxiety. The holographic display activated, showing images of armed forces and what appeared to be capture scenarios. He was trying to tell them something about his past encounters with human military. "We're not giving you up," Maya declared, standing protectively beside the massive creature. "Your family now." The war dog's mechanical eye widened at the word family, his scales shifting through a pattern they'd never seen before. Sarah watched in amazement as Atlas struggled to rise, his massive form trembling with effort. But instead of aggression or fear, he moved with deliberate care, positioning himself between them and the barn door. He wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to protect them. "No," Sarah said firmly, understanding his intent. "We protect each other. That's what family means." James burst in, breathing hard. "They're 2 farms away. We need to decide now." Sarah looked around the barn, at the medical equipment they'd modified, the star charts Maya had drawn based on Atlas's projections, the corner where the war dog had started creating his own art by arranging tools and hay into complex geometric patterns. This wasn't just a hideout anymore. It was a place of healing, learning, and transformation. "The root cellar," she said suddenly. "The old Prohibition tunnel. Atlas, can you move that far?" The war dog's iris contracted in acknowledgement. They discovered he could alter his power signature to near-dormant levels when necessary, a survival mechanism from his combat days. In the cellar, surrounded by yards of earth, he might just avoid detection. The next hour was a carefully choreographed operation. They moved Atlas through the concealed tunnel James's grandparents had used during Prohibition, carefully transferring the essential medical equipment. Maya erased their traces in the barn, while Sarah reconfigured the power systems to mask any remaining energy signatures. They finished just as the military vehicles pulled into their drive. Sarah emerged from the barn, makeup smeared and clothes deliberately disheveled, a broken tractor part in her hands. "Can I help you?" she called out, playing the role of the overwhelmed veterinarian perfectly. The officials were professional but thorough. They spoke of unusual energy readings, possible debris from the recent space battle. Sarah nodded sympathetically, explaining how their veterinary equipment sometimes caused strange signatures. Would they like to see the ultrasound machine that had been acting up? As she led them through an inspection of the barn, Sarah silently thanked Atlas for showing them how to mask their tracks. The war dog had spent years evading detection during combat missions. Now those same skills were protecting them all. The officials finally left, satisfied that nothing unusual was happening at the Chen family farm. Only then did Sarah allow herself to breathe normally again. When they retrieved Atlas from the cellar, his scales were pulsing with what they'd come to recognize as amusement. "You think that was funny, do you?" Sarah asked, but she was smiling too. Atlas projected a brief image, a memory of himself charging through enemy lines, followed by a contrasting scene of him hiding in a cellar while humans covered for him. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. That night, as they settled Atlas back into his regular space, Maya curled up against his armored flank with her tablet. "Want to learn about Earth's oceans today?" she asked. The war dog's scales rippled with interest, but he paused the projection he was about to create. Instead, he displayed a simple question mark, their symbol for asking about something new. "What is it?" Sarah asked, recognizing this as significant. Atlas's next projection showed a series of images, his former masters, a broken chain, and finally the 3 humans who had saved him, surrounded by a soft glow. The meaning was clear. He wasn't just asking about oceans. He was asking about freedom, about choices, about belonging. Sarah placed her hand on his armored head, feeling the warm hum of his systems beneath. "You're not a weapon anymore, Atlas. You're not even just a patient. You're whatever you choose to be." The war dog's scales shifted to a new color they'd never seen before, a warm, deep gold that filled the barn with gentle light. And in that glow, Sarah saw their future taking shape. Not just a story of rescue, but one of revolution. Proof that even beings engineered for war could choose peace. That family could be found in the most unexpected places, and that healing came in many forms. Maya had already fallen asleep against Atlas's side, her tablet showing pictures of ocean depths yet to be explored. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, in this moment, they were simply family, unusual and impossible as that might seem. Atlas's mechanical eye dimmed to its rest state, but his scales continued to pulse softly with that new golden light, the color, they would later learn, of hope. The warning came in the middle of the night. Atlas's scales flashed urgent crimson, jerking Sarah and Maya awake from their makeshift beds in the barn. The war dog's holographic projector activated, displaying a three-dimensional map of the surrounding airspace. Multiple vessels were approaching, and these weren't human designs. Drachnid ships, Maya whispered, recognizing the angular configurations from Atlas's previous teachings. They found you. Atlas's mechanical iris contracted to a pinpoint, his massive form coiling with tension. The projection shifted, showing a simulation of what would happen if the ships detected him. Systematic destruction of the surrounding area, no survivors. The message was clear. His former masters wouldn't just take him back. They'd eliminate any evidence of his transformation. Sarah's mind raced. They had less than an hour before the ships would be in range. James, she called her brother over their secure comm line, Protocol Omega. Now, they prepared for this possibility, but the reality was still terrifying. Atlas projected another image, himself, walking away from the farm. He would surrender to protect them. The familiar pattern of his scales spoke of duty, of sacrifice. No, Maya said firmly, pressing her hand against his armored flank. We didn't save you just to lose you. Sarah was already activating the barn's hidden systems. Over the past months, they'd done more than heal Atlas. They'd learned from him. His knowledge of Drachnid technology, combined with human ingenuity, had allowed them to develop countermeasures. The barn's walls hummed as James activated the electromagnetic shield they'd reverse-engineered from Atlas's armor. It wouldn't hide them completely, but it would mask their exact location. More importantly, it would hide what Atlas had become. They're looking for a weapon, Sarah explained, checking the readings. But that's not what you are anymore. Atlas's scales rippled with understanding. Over the months, his natural bioluminescence had evolved, developing patterns that had never been part of his original programming. Where once there had been only tactical displays and threat assessments, now there were expressions of curiosity, joy, and love. The war dog had learned to create art, projecting stunning celestial displays that combined his memories of distant worlds with Earth's own natural beauty. He developed a deep fascination with Earth's wildlife, often spending hours watching the birds that nested in the barn's rafters. His deadly combat protocols had been gradually overlaid with something far more precious, wisdom. Maya worked quickly, activating the network of sensors they'd planted throughout the surrounding forest. Remember the plan, she said, her young voice steady despite the danger. We just have to convince them you're not here. But Atlas had other ideas. His projection shifted, showing a new plan, one that made Sarah's breath catch. The war dog wanted to face his former masters, not to fight, but to show them what he'd become. His scales pulsed with determination and something else, hope. It's too dangerous, Sarah started to argue, but stopped as Atlas created a new image. It showed scenes from the past months. Maya teaching him about Earth's ecosystems, Sarah working to heal not just his wounds but his spirit, James helping him learn to create rather than destroy. The message was profound. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, but for the right to choose his own path. The Drachnid ships were getting closer. Their sensors would soon pierce even the electromagnetic shields. Atlas rose to his full height, his transformed appearance magnificent and terrible. Where once his armor had been purely functional, it now bore intricate patterns of earth minerals they'd used to heal him. His mechanical components had been modified with human technology, creating a hybrid that was neither weapon nor pet, but something entirely new. If we do this, Sarah said carefully, we do it together. Atlas's response was to lower himself, offering his back to them. He'd never done this before. Physical contact had been strictly limited to medical necessity. But now he was inviting them to ride with him, to face whatever came as a family. Maya climbed up without hesitation, finding secure holds among his armored plates. Sarah followed, her heart pounding but her mind clear. James would coordinate from the ground, ready with their backup plans. As they emerged from the barn into the pre-dawn darkness, Atlas's scales began to glow with a pattern they'd never seen before, not the gold of hope or the blue of peace, but a shifting aurora of colors that seemed to draw power from the earth itself. He had learned to communicate not just through projections, but through his very being, and what he was expressing now was nothing less than transcendence. The Drachnid ships appeared in the sky, their search beams cutting through the night. But what they found wasn't a rogue weapon or a stolen piece of military hardware. They found something their sensors couldn't categorize, a being that had evolved beyond his programming, protected by the very species he'd been created to destroy. Atlas raised his head to the stars, and every scale on his body blazed with light. The message he projected wasn't just for his former masters, but for anyone who would listen. Here stood a creature of war who had chosen peace, a weapon that had learned to heal, a soldier who had found his true purpose not in destruction, but in protection. And he was no longer alone. The Drachnid ships circled lower, their weapons primed. But Atlas stood his ground, Maya and Sarah at his sides, James monitoring their defenses, all of them united in a defiance that transcended species. Whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced everything else, together. The night air crackled with tension as two civilizations, two philosophies, two possible futures hung in the balance. And in that moment, Atlas did something unprecedented. He began to sing. The sound carried harmonics impossible for human or Drachnid technology to produce, a song that spoke of transformation, of choice, of love. It was no longer a story of rescue. It had become a revolution. The Drachnid ships held position above the farm, their engines thrumming with barely contained power. In their spotlight beams, Atlas's transformed appearance was even more striking, no longer just a war machine, but a bridge between worlds. Sarah felt his body tense beneath her, ready for whatever would come next. A voice boomed from the lead ship, speaking in the harsh tones of the Drachnid language. Atlas's scales flickered as he translated for them. Return the asset. Final warning. But before anyone could respond, a new sound filled the air. Helicopters. Dozens of them approaching fast. The local military had detected the alien ships. Within moments, the farm became the center of a three-way standoff. Drachnid warships above, human forces surrounding the perimeter, and in the middle, a small family refusing to back down. This is General Sarah Chen, United Earth Defense. A familiar voice crackled over multiple frequencies. Sarah's heart skipped, her sister, the one person in the family she hadn't told about Atlas. You are in restricted airspace. State your intentions. Maya gripped tighter to Atlas's armor as he projected a complex series of images, showing Laura's position in relation to theirs. He'd figured out the connection through their shared surname, his artificial intelligence making leaps that still amazed them. Laura, Sarah activated her comm. Don't shoot. There's something you need to see. Sarah. Laura's voice cracked with surprise. What are you? Wait, are you under that spotlight? Atlas took that moment to step forward, his scales rippling with purposeful communication. He projected his story into the sky, not just images now, but a full-spectrum display that even the Drachnid ship's sensors could read. It showed his transformation from weapon to protector, from asset to family member. But more importantly, it showed possibility, the potential for change, for understanding between species. The Drachnid ship's weapons remained charged, but they didn't fire. Atlas's display had given them pause, showing them something their rigid military hierarchy hadn't prepared them for: evolution beyond programming. "By the stars," Laura whispered over the comm. "Sarah, is that... did you?" "I'm a vet," Sarah said simply. "I help those who need healing. Sometimes that means helping them become more than they were made to be." Atlas's projection shifted, showing scenes from Earth's history. Moments when enemies became allies, when understanding overcame fear. He'd spent months studying human history, fascinated by humanity's capacity for both destruction and reconciliation. A new voice cut through the tension, the Drachnid commander, now speaking in accented English. "The asset is malfunctioning. Its programming has been corrupted." "No." Maya stood up on Atlas's back, her voice clear and strong. "He's not malfunctioning. He's growing. Evolution isn't corruption. It's natural, even for artificial beings." Atlas's scales pulsed with pride at her words. He'd taught her about Drachnid biology, and she'd taught him about Earth's endless adaptability. Now she was applying those lessons in ways neither species had anticipated. The standoff stretched on, the air heavy with possibility and danger. Then Atlas did something unexpected. He powered down his defensive systems completely. His scales dimmed to their natural state, and he lowered himself to the ground. It was the ultimate display of trust, showing both sides that he was choosing a new way. Sarah understood what he was doing. "He's not a weapon anymore," she called out to both human and Drachnid forces. "He's a testament to what we can all become when we stop letting our programming, whether biological or artificial, limit us." Laura's helicopter descended slowly, landing at a safe distance. The general emerged, still wearing her command uniform, her face a mix of professional concern and personal shock. "Sarah, you realize this violates about 15 international protocols." "Sometimes protocols need to evolve too," Sarah replied, standing her ground. "Atlas has shown us that change is possible, even in systems designed to resist it." The Drachnid ships remained hovering, their commanders clearly struggling with this unprecedented situation. Atlas projected one final image, a future where humans and Drachnids worked together, with beings like himself serving not as weapons, but as bridges between civilizations. "Your empire prides itself on advancement," Sarah addressed the Drachnid ships directly. "Well, this is advancement. Not through conquest, but through understanding. Atlas isn't your property anymore. He's proof that your own creations can transcend their original purpose." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, the Drachnid ships powered down their weapons. The lead ship's commander spoke again. "The assets, evolution, requires study. This is unprecedented." "His name is Atlas," Maya corrected firmly. "And he's not here for study. He's here because he chose to be." Laura stepped forward, her military training warring with her family loyalty. But as she watched Atlas gently nuzzle her niece, his deadly weapons now used only to project beautiful light shows, something in her stance softened. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "this is an opportunity for a different kind of diplomatic relation." Atlas's scales brightened, showing scenes of possibility. Training grounds converted to learning centers, war dogs becoming ambassadors, humans and Drachnids sharing knowledge rather than weapons. He had spent months learning to dream, and now he was teaching others to do the same. The night that had begun in crisis was ending in conversation. As the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, representatives from both species were cautiously meeting on neutral ground, the Chen family farm. Atlas stood watch over it all, no longer a weapon of war, but a guardian of peace. and in his mechanical eye there was something that looked very much like satisfaction. 1 year later, the Chen family farm had become something extraordinary. What was once a simple veterinary practice had transformed into Earth's first interspecies cultural center, with Atlas at its heart. The old barn, now expanded and enhanced with both human and Drachnid technology, served as a beacon for others seeking transformation. Atlas stood in the morning sun, his scales shimmering with patterns that told the story of his journey. Where once there had been only military-grade armor, now there were traces of Earth minerals, organic components, and hybrid technologies that represented the best of both worlds. But the most remarkable changes were invisible to the eye. Ready for today's class? Maya asked, now 13 and considered one of the foremost experts in Drachnid human communication. Atlas's scales flickered with anticipation. Teaching had become his greatest joy. Today's visitors were special. The first group of Drachnid war dogs who had chosen to follow Atlas's path. They arrived with their human partners, former military personnel who had seen the possibility of connection rather than conflict. The sight of these massive beings, each at different stages of their own transformation, never failed to move Sarah. Atlas began the session by projecting his memories of his first days on Earth, the fear, the confusion, but also the moment he realized he could choose a different path. His fellow war dogs watched intently, their own scales reflecting complex emotions their original programming had never intended them to feel. The key, Sarah addressed the group, standing confidently beside Atlas, is understanding that healing isn't just about repairing damage. It's about growing beyond what you were made to be. The evidence of this philosophy surrounded them. In one corner of the facility, a war dog was learning to use its projection abilities to create art, its former combat protocols repurposed for creativity. Another worked with environmental scientists, its advanced sensors now helping to track and protect endangered species. Each had found their own way to transform their weapons into tools for peace. Laura, who had become an unexpected ally, arrived with a delegation of United Earth Defense officials. The Drachnid Embassy is requesting more cultural exchange programs, she announced. It seems our experiment here has sparked quite a revolution back in their empire. Atlas projected a star map showing the spread of their influence, points of light representing each location where war dogs had chosen new paths. What had started as one act of compassion on a small farm had grown into a movement that was reshaping two civilizations' understanding of consciousness, evolution, and choice. Maya had developed a theory that the war dog's capacity for growth had always been there, buried beneath layers of military programming. They were never just weapons, she explained to a group of visiting scientists. They were possibilities waiting to be recognized. Atlas confirmed this with a complex display showing his own neural evolution. His original combat protocols hadn't been erased, they had been transformed. The same precision that once made him a perfect killer now made him an incredible healer and teacher. The loyalty that had bound him to his military masters now expressed itself as deep love for his chosen family. Sarah watched as Atlas worked with a particularly traumatized war dog, one recently liberated from a defunct military program. His approach was gentle but unwavering, showing his fellow being images of what it could become. Freedom, she had learned, isn't just about breaking chains. It's about discovering who you are without them. The day progressed with its usual mix of challenges and breakthroughs. A young war dog learned to modulate its energy emissions to create music instead of weapons fire. Another discovered it could use its tactical analysis systems to solve environmental problems. Each small victory was celebrated by the entire community. As evening approached, Atlas gathered everyone for what had become a cherished tradition, Using his enhanced projection abilities, combined with what he'd learned about Earth's artistic traditions, he created a symphony of light and sound that told the story of both species' journey from conflict to cooperation. The display was magnificent. Stars wheeled overhead, planets danced, and through it all ran the thread of connection that had begun with one family's choice to see beyond appearances. The war dogs and their human partners watched in appreciation, each recognizing their own story in the tapestry of light. "You know," Sarah said quietly to Maya as they watched, "when I first found Atlas, I thought I was just saving one life. I never imagined we were starting a revolution." Maya smiled, leaning against Atlas's warm flank. "That's the thing about kindness. You never know how far it will ripple." Atlas's scales shimmered with a pattern that had become uniquely his, a combination of colors that spoke of family, purpose, and hope. He had come so far from the wounded weapon they'd found in their fields, but in many ways he was still the same being who had first chosen trust over terror. As night fell over the farm, the gathered war dogs and humans settled in for an evening of sharing stories and dreams. The barriers between species seemed to fade away, replaced by a simple truth. The capacity for change existed in all beings, if only they were given the chance to discover it. Atlas looked out over his gathered family, both human and drachnid, biological and artificial, and his scales glowed with the soft gold of contentment. He had been created as a guardian of war, but he had chosen to become something far more powerful, a guardian of possibility. And in the stars above, watched by beings both human and alien, a new future was taking shape, one choice at a time.